The sun was just beginning to climb over the eastern ridge of the mountains as I pulled into the small gravel parking lot at the trailhead. It was one of those perfect late spring mornings, crisp enough to see your breath, but with the promise of warmth once the day fully awakened. I checked my watch, 7:15 a.m. Ethan was late, as usual. I couldn't help but smile at the predictability of it. In the 5 years I'd known him, he had never once been on time for anything. It was just one of those quirks I'd grown to find endearing rather than annoying. I stepped out of my car and stretched, taking in the scent of pine and damp earth. The trailhead sign indicated we'd be tackling the Silverback Ridge Trail, a moderately difficult 8-mile loop that would take us through some of the most beautiful scenery in the state. I'd been meticulously planning this hike for weeks, researching the trail, checking weather patterns, and packing appropriate supplies. That was my way. I liked knowing what to expect, having contingency plans, being prepared. Ethan, on the other hand, approached life with a carefree spontaneity that both fascinated and terrified me. The sound of tires on gravel pulled me from my thoughts. Ethan's blue Jeep came bouncing into the lot, music blaring through open windows. He parked haphazardly beside my neatly positioned sedan, a perfect visual metaphor for our contrasting personalities. "Alex," he called out, jumping from the Jeep with an energy that seemed impossible for this early hour. His dark curls were wild and untamed, and his smile lit up his entire face. "Sorry I'm late. I saw the most amazing sunrise coming up the mountain road and had to stop for pictures." He held up his camera as evidence. "Of course you did," I replied, unable to keep the affection from my voice. "I've only been waiting 15 minutes. That's practically early for you." Ethan laughed, the sound echoing against the mountainside. "You know me too well." He threw an arm around my shoulders, giving me a quick squeeze that sent my heart racing. This weekend is exactly what we both needed. No work, no responsibilities, just us and the mountains. Just us. The words hung in the air between us, carrying a weight neither of us acknowledged. We'd been dancing around this unspoken thing between us for years now. Friends, yes, but with moments of something more. Lingering glances, touches that lasted a beat too long, late-night conversations that veered into territory friends typically don't explore. This weekend getaway had been his idea, a chance to reconnect after both of us had been buried in work for months. "Let me grab my pack and we can hit the trail," Ethan said, breaking the moment. He rummaged through his Jeep, pulling out a backpack that looked suspiciously light for a day-long hike. "Please tell me you packed more than just your camera and some trail mix," I said, eyeing his bag skeptically. Ethan rolled his eyes good-naturedly. "Yes, Mom. I have water, first aid kit, extra layers, and yes, trail mix, the good kind with the chocolate pieces." I patted my own meticulously packed backpack. "I've got the map, compass, emergency blanket, water purification tablets, and probably enough supplies to survive the apocalypse." Ethan finished for me, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "That's why we make such a good team, Alex. You think of everything, and I remind you to actually enjoy the moment." There was truth in his words. We balanced each other in ways that felt almost cosmic, his spontaneity pulling me out of my careful shell, my planning keeping his impulsiveness from leading to disaster. At least most of the time. We set off on the trail, Ethan immediately taking the lead. The path started gently enough, winding through a forest of towering pines. Dappled sunlight broke through the canopy, creating patterns on the needle-covered ground. The air was filled with the sounds of nature awakening, birds calling to each other, the distant rush of a stream, the soft whisper of wind through the trees. "Remember that time we went camping at Lake Meridian?" Ethan asked, glancing back at me with a grin. "And that raccoon stole your perfectly organized food supply?" I groaned at the memory. "How could I forget? You laughed so hard you fell out of your camp chair. Your face was priceless." Ethan chuckled. "You looked personally offended, like that raccoon had deliberately targeted you." "He did. He left your messy pile of snacks completely untouched and went straight for my color-coded meal plan." Ethan's laughter echoed through the trees. "Nature appreciates spontaneity, Alex. That raccoon was trying to teach you a valuable lesson." "The only lesson I learned was to hang my food from a tree branch at night," I retorted, but I was smiling too. These shared memories, these inside jokes, they were the foundation of whatever this thing was between us. As we hiked further, the trail began to steepen. Conversation gave way to the rhythm of our breathing and the steady crunch of boots on the path. I found myself watching Ethan as he moved ahead of me. The confident way he navigated the terrain, the broad span of his shoulders, the way the sunlight caught in his hair. He'd been my best friend for 5 years, ever since we'd met in a geology class in college. We'd bonded over a shared love of the outdoors, though we approached that love differently. For me, nature was something to be respected, carefully navigated, and meticulously documented. For Ethan, it was a playground, a canvas, a place of endless possibility. After about 2 hours of hiking, we reached a rocky outcropping that offered a spectacular view of the valley below. The forest stretched out like a green carpet, broken occasionally by the silver ribbon of a stream or the jutting gray of rock formations. "This is perfect," Ethan declared, dropping his pack and pulling out his camera. "Look at that light on the valley. It's magical." I had to agree. The mid-morning sun cast everything in a golden glow, creating a scene so beautiful it almost hurt to look at it. I settled on a flat rock, pulling out my water bottle and a protein bar, while Ethan moved around taking photos, occasionally exclaiming over a particularly good shot. "You should see this one," he said, coming to sit beside me and showing me his camera's display. The photo captured not just the valley, but somehow the feeling of the moment, the vastness, the beauty, the perfect stillness of it all. "It's beautiful," I said softly. "You have a gift, seeing things the way you do." Ethan's eyes met mine, and something passed between us, a current of understanding, of connection. "That's why I wanted you here with me," he said, his voice unusually serious. "You see things differently than I do. Together, we see it all." The moment stretched between us, heavy with possibility. Then Ethan cleared his throat and stood up. "We should keep going if we want to make it to the waterfall by lunch." I nodded, repacking my supplies with perhaps more attention than necessary. These moments had been happening more frequently lately. These almost something moments that left my heart racing and my thoughts scrambled. We continued along the trail, which now wound along a ridgeline offering spectacular views on both sides. Ethan kept stopping to take photos, and I found myself less concerned with our pace than I might normally be. There was something about being here, with him, that made time feel less important. "So there's a fork in the trail coming up?" I said, consulting the map I'd studied so thoroughly before our trip. "We need to take the right path to get to the waterfall." Ethan nodded absently, his attention caught by a hawk circling overhead. "Look at that wingspan," he murmured, raising his camera. About 20 minutes later, we came to the fork I'd mentioned. A weathered wooden sign marked the junction, but years of exposure had faded the lettering to near illegibility. "Right fork for the waterfall, right?" Ethan asked, already starting down that path. I frowned, looking at the sign and then at my map. Something didn't quite match up. "Wait, I'm not sure," I called after him. "Let me double-check." But Ethan was already around the bend, his enthusiasm carrying him forward. I sighed and followed, still trying to reconcile what I was seeing with what I remembered from my research. The trail began to narrow, becoming less well-defined. The forest grew denser, the trees closer together, blocking more of the sunlight. A sense of unease began to grow in the pit of my stomach. "Ethan," I called ahead. "I don't think this is right. The trail should be wider, more established." He paused, waiting for me to catch up. "Maybe it's just less traveled," he suggested, but I could see a flicker of doubt in his eyes. The sign pointed this way. The sign was so faded it could have been pointing anywhere, I argued, pulling out my map again. "And look at the trail. It's barely there." Ethan took the map from me, studying it with a furrowed brow. "Okay, maybe you're right. But we've been walking this way for almost half an hour. Let's just go a little further and see if it connects back to the main trail." I wanted to protest, to insist we turn back immediately, but something in his hopeful expression made me hesitate. "Fine, but just a little further." We continued on, the trail becoming increasingly difficult to follow. What had started as a narrow but discernible path was now little more than occasional breaks in the underbrush. The trees had closed in around us, and the landmarks I'd so carefully noted from the map were nowhere to be seen. After another 20 minutes, I stopped. "Ethan, we need to turn back. We're definitely off the trail." He stopped too, looking around with a growing realization that I was right. The forest here was wild, untamed, with no sign of human passage. "Okay," he admitted. "You're right. Let's head back. We turned around, trying to retrace our steps, but the forest floor offered little guidance. What few markers we might have noticed on our way in now seemed indistinguishable from the surrounding wilderness. Do you recognize any of this? I asked, trying to keep the panic from my voice. Ethan shook his head, his earlier confidence fading. It all looks the same. I pulled out my compass, trying to orient ourselves. The parking lot is northeast of here. If we head in that direction, we should eventually hit the main trail. Ethan nodded, clearly relieved that I had come prepared. Lead the way, navigator. We set off in what I hoped was the right direction, but the terrain was challenging, steep in places, with fallen logs and dense underbrush to navigate. An hour passed, then two, with no sign of the trail. The sun had passed its zenith and was now beginning its descent toward the western horizon. My initial concern was blooming into full-blown anxiety. We're lost, I finally said, voicing the fear that had been growing in both of us. We're completely lost. Ethan stopped, turning to face me. I expected to see worry matching my own, but instead, there was a strange calm in his expression. Yes, he agreed. We're lost. But we're lost together, and we have supplies, and it's a beautiful day. We'll figure it out. His calm was infuriating. This isn't one of your adventures, Ethan. This is serious. Night falls fast in the mountains, and temperatures drop. We don't have camping gear. We don't have enough food for more than today. No one knows exactly where we are. Alex, he said, his voice gentle but firm. Panicking won't help. We have water, we have some food, we have a compass, and we have each other. We'll find our way back, or someone will find us. But right now, we need to focus on finding a safe place to spend the night. The rational part of me knew he was right. Panic was the enemy in survival situations. But the planner in me was in full meltdown mode, cataloging all the things that could go wrong, all the preparations I should have made. Ethan stepped closer, placing his hands on my shoulders. Hey, look at me, he said softly. We're going to be okay. I promise. I met his gaze, finding reassurance in the steady green of his eyes. He believed what he was saying, and somehow, that made me believe it too. I took a deep breath and nodded. Okay, I said. Let's find somewhere to set up camp for the night. With a new purpose, we began searching for a suitable location. The ideal spot would be relatively flat, protected from wind, near water if possible, and free from hazards like dead trees that might fall. After about half an hour of searching, we found a small clearing nestled against a rock formation that would provide some shelter from the elements. This looks good, Ethan said, dropping his pack. The rocks will block the wind, and they might even reflect some heat from a fire. I had to admit it was a good spot. There was even a small stream about 50 yards away, which solved our water concerns. As Ethan began gathering firewood, I took stock of our supplies. Between us, we had about 2 liters of water, several protein bars, Ethan's trail mix, a couple of apples, and some beef jerky. Not a feast, but enough to keep us going. More importantly, we had my emergency blanket, first aid kit, and the means to make fire. As the daylight began to fade, Ethan got a small fire going. The warmth and light immediately made our situation feel less dire. We sat close together, sharing an apple and some trail mix. I'm sorry, Ethan said suddenly. This is my fault. If I hadn't been so eager to forge ahead, if I'd waited for you to check the map properly. I shook my head. It's not your fault. Well, not entirely, I amended with a small smile. I could have been more insistent. And to be fair, that sign was really misleading. Ethan laughed softly. We make quite a pair, don't we? The overplanner and the underplanner, both lost in the woods. At least between us we have a decent set of survival supplies, I pointed out. Your spontaneity and my overpreparation might just balance out into exactly what we need. As night fully descended, the forest transformed. Sounds seemed amplified. The rustle of leaves, the call of a distant owl, the soft gurgle of the stream. The stars emerged, brilliantly clear away from city lights, a vast canopy of twinkling diamonds against the black velvet of the sky. Ethan added more wood to the fire, then settled back beside me, our shoulders touching. You know, he said thoughtfully, there's something almost magical about this. Being out here, away from everything, just the two of us under these stars. I had to admit there was truth in his words. Despite the circumstances, there was a strange beauty to this moment. It is pretty amazing, I conceded. though I would appreciate it more if I knew we had a way back to civilization tomorrow. We'll find our way, Ethan said with certainty. Or someone will find us. But for tonight, maybe we can just be here, in this moment. The firelight danced across his features, highlighting the strong line of his jaw, the curve of his lips. In that moment, he was beautiful in a way that caught at my heart. "Can I tell you something?" he asked, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. I nodded, suddenly unable to speak. "I've been wanting to get away with you like this for a long time. Not lost in the woods, specifically," he added with a small laugh. "But somewhere away from everything else. Somewhere it could just be us." My heart was hammering in my chest. "Why?" I managed to ask, though I thought I might know the answer. Ethan turned to face me fully, the firelight reflecting in his eyes. "Because when I'm with you, everything makes sense. Even when we're arguing. Even when we're seeing things completely differently. Being with you feels right in a way nothing else does." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with meaning. This was it. The moment when we would either acknowledge what had been growing between us or retreat back to the safety of friendship. "I feel the same way," I admitted, my voice barely audible over the crackling of the fire. "I have for a long time." Ethan's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. Slowly, giving me every chance to pull away, he leaned in. When his lips met mine, it felt like coming home, familiar and new all at once. His hand came up to cup my cheek, and I leaned into his touch, deepening the kiss. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathless. Ethan rested his forehead against mine, his thumb tracing gentle patterns on my cheek. "I've wanted to do that for years," he confessed. "Why didn't you?" I asked. "I was afraid. Afraid of ruining what we had. Afraid you didn't feel the same way." I laughed softly. "We've been idiots, haven't we? Both feeling the same way, both too scared to say anything." "Better late than never," Ethan said, pulling me closer. We talked long into the night, the fire burning low, sharing secrets and hopes and dreams that we'd kept hidden. It was as if getting physically lost had allowed us to find each other in a new way. When the temperature dropped further, we huddled together under the emergency blanket, finding warmth in each other's arms. I woke to the first light of dawn filtering through the trees. Ethan was still asleep, his arm draped protectively over me. For a moment, I just watched him, marveling at how everything had changed in the span of one night. As if sensing my gaze, he stirred, his eyes fluttering open. "Morning," he murmured, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Morning," I replied, unable to keep from smiling back. We shared the last of our food for breakfast, then packed up our makeshift camp. The question of how to find our way back loomed large, but somehow, it didn't seem as daunting as it had the day before. "I think our best bet is to follow the stream," I suggested. "Water usually leads to civilization eventually, and it gives us a clear path to follow." Ethan nodded in agreement. "And it solves our water supply issue." We set off along the stream, the morning sun warming our backs. The forest seemed less intimidating in the daylight, more welcoming. Or perhaps it was just that everything looked different now, after what had passed between us. "You know," Ethan said as we walked, "getting lost might be the best thing that's ever happened to me." I laughed. "Only you would see it that way." "Think about it," he insisted. "If we hadn't gotten lost, would we have had the courage to say what we said last night? Or would we have gone back to our normal lives, still dancing around how we feel?" He had a point. There had been something about the vulnerability of being lost, of facing uncertainty together, that had broken down the walls between us. "Maybe you're right," I conceded. "But I still want to find our way back to civilization today." "Of course," he agreed. "I'm not suggesting we live in the woods forever, though I could think of worse fates than being lost with you." The stream led us through a beautiful section of forest we would never have seen had we stayed on the trail. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, creating a dappled pattern on the ground. Birds called to each other overhead, and once, we spotted a deer watching us curiously from a distance. After about 2 hours of walking, the sound of voices reached us, distant at first, then clearer. We picked up our pace, following the sounds until we emerged from the trees onto a wide, well-maintained trail. A group of hikers was passing by, and they looked at us with surprise. "Are you two okay?" one of them asked. "You look like you've been roughing it." "We got lost yesterday," I explained. "Took a wrong turn and ended up spending the night in the woods." The hiker nodded sympathetically. That happens on these trails. The signage isn't great in some places. You're on the main loop now, though. The parking lot is about 3 miles that way. He pointed down the trail. We thanked them and set off in the direction indicated, relief washing over us. We were safe. We were found. We were going to be okay. See, Ethan said, taking my hand as we walked. I told you we'd find our way back. I squeezed his hand, marveling at how natural it felt to be connected to him this way. Yes, you did. Though I think luck had more to do with it than your optimism. He laughed. Maybe. But my point stands. Getting lost led us to something beautiful. As we walked hand in hand down the trail, I couldn't help but agree. Sometimes the wrong turn is exactly the right one. Sometimes getting lost is the only way to truly be found. When we finally reached the parking lot, our cars were the only ones left, 2 solitary vehicles waiting patiently for our return. The sight of them, so normal and every day after our adventure, almost made me laugh. Before we separated to drive home, Ethan pulled me close for one more kiss. So, he said when we broke apart, where do we go from here? I looked into his eyes, seeing all the possibility there, all the adventures waiting for us, both in nature and in life. Anywhere, I answered, as long as we go together. He smiled, that brilliant smile that had first captured my heart years ago. I was hoping you'd say that. As I drove home later, I couldn't help but think about how sometimes the best things in life come from the unexpected, the unplanned, the moments when we lose our way only to find something infinitely more precious. Ethan had been right all along. Getting lost had led us exactly where we needed to be. Total _char_count. 18,532.